Okay, so hi everybody. Welcome to what is our last Caribbean research seminar of the year. We've had a really fantastic, really vibrant and just intellectually amazing presentations that we've had throughout the year. And I'm just really delighted that the series is going from strength to strength. Just a polite reminder then that we'll be putting over the summer, we'll be putting together the series from September. So if any of you would like to chair a session, or if any of you might like to be considered to present your work at one of these sessions, then please just contact me directly and I'll put my details in the chat. So it gives me great pleasure then to welcome today Safiya Kamaria Kinshasa, who's a British-born Barbadian PhD student in cultural studies at the University of Leeds. She is a choreo poet who chiefly uses dance to compose her work. Her practice-led doctoral research interrogates existing framing of dances performed by Black Barbadian women to unearth buried narratives of Black femininity in Barbados. Safiya is applying Afro-Diasporic dance techniques as part of her ethnographic fieldwork, and she has published extensively. She released her debut poetry collection, Cane, Corn and Gully, which was the first book to feature dance notation of the enslaved in partnership with the Barbados Museum and Historical Society. She was also shortlisted for the Rathbones Folio Prize and the Felix Dennis Forward Prize for Best First Collection, as well as publishing in a number of notable literary journals. So thank you so much for joining us today, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Eve, for for that lovely introduction. I'm really looking forward to sharing my work today, especially because I have included a new technique into my doctoral research project, so for my fieldwork. So I'm really excited, and so it's been confirmed today. So exciting times. Okay. Dancing Beyond the Black. So this presentation is going to start from 2 days ago, take you all the way back to 6 years ago when I first embarked on this dance poetic journey into Barbados and into the archives, and all the way up to today, and what I am proposing at the moment. So 2 days ago, on a delayed and overpacked train on the way to Leeds, where I currently am, I was sitting in a four-seater. Beside me sat a couple facing each other, and in front of me sat a very distressed looking dark-skinned Black girl on a phone call. Now, most of the passengers in the carriage were white, and it was evident she was the cause of a lot of speculation. She wore baggy pants and a crop top with no bra, and I know this because she removed her jumper, which showed the underpart of her chest. I would like to make it clear to you that two white female teenagers walked past wearing exactly the same outfit in different colors. So it was not necessarily, I didn't actually realize that this crop top style was a style, but it is actually a style by some influencer. Don't care for it. Obviously, I got style of my own, but okay. All right. This was the style. So while I was reading, the girl before me, she started crying, right? And her tears were so plentiful. It was as though, I would say, a mirror was dissolving down her cheeks. She looked very uncomfortable. She was rocking back and forth. She got up. She started to walk behind her out of the carriage. As she left, there were very concerning comments from male and female voices, which I heard along the lines of, maybe we should call the police. Do you think it's sex work? When she returned to her seat, the tears continued. I began to write in capital letters, "Are you okay?" But before I could show her my words, she left her seat again to walk in the other direction, clearly afflicted. The other passengers kept exchanging concerning looks. So I asked the couple next to me to look after my things, and I walked over to the young lady who had purchased some water. 2 carriages down, I asked her if she was okay, but she did not speak. English was not her first language. She was more familiar with French and Spanish, and that began a conversation of movement. So I made signs for pain and tears. I used my body, and in an exchange, she held on to her stomach. I rubbed my stomach, she rubbed her stomach. I made a rinse gesture over my stomach, and she nodded, eyes wide. I said a few words around menstrual cycle, but did a lot of these kind of movements, movement systems, rinsing, like anguish, clenching, contracting, and expansion of my fingers. And she starts to do this back and forward towards her stomach. So quickly discovered it was something similar to endometriosis, and I explained I would help her and gestured her to come with me. When we arrived back at our seat, I gave her some Anodin, and thanks to Google Translate, I asked a few more practical questions regarding if she had someone to pick her up and her age. I discovered she was 15 years old, a minor. I noticed the attitudes towards her shift when she started smiling, and the atmosphere seemed to calm down when everyone realized the situation was under control. But let us return to the issue of the problematic and harmful judgments that took place, which probably led to the same incident in 2020, where a Black girl who was known as Child Q was strip searched by police. And aside from 2 major studies carried out in Washington, 2017, the Girl Interrupted study, the adultification of Black girls, and a similar study carried out in Pennsylvania between 2017 to 2020, the effect of adultification on empathy for Black individuals. Time and time again, we witness less empathy and compassion given to Black girls who are expected to grow up earlier. And though I am not suggesting that every white person on the train did not want to help her, we need to be clear that insinuating sex trafficking was an appropriate conclusion to a girl on her time of the month. It's a little alarming. So where do these opinions and where do these views come from? Yes, so let's go all the way back to 1657, where my story begins. Where my original research begins, where a plantation owner wrote his accounts of Black women, and where where my project began. It was phrases like these. So while I was on a commission as a poet, which haunted me. So while I was searching for traces of speech in my ancestry within the Anglo-Caribbean, the French, Spanish, and Portuguese were more successful at documenting the lives of enslaved Black people, but the British were not very helpful to me, especially those in Barbados, where my inquiry was. When reading about the slave trade and Black dance, the discourse usually centers around America, Haiti, and Jamaica and Cuba. Barbados has a reputation for being the land full of placated and obedient enslaved people, and a conservative country, which is absolutely ludicrous considering Barbados's history is seasoned with rebellion, disruption, glorious rudeness, as I like to say, and creative means of empowerment and achievements. However, I discovered that a trick had been missing in academia, and that was an important facet in Afro-Diasporic cultures movement. So I am invested in understanding how Black Barbadian women have historically used dance as a discursive exercise towards understanding the notion of freedom and agency in a country that is very misrepresented, regarding progressive and anti-colonial discourse, despite becoming a republic. I think that was the quote that really made me, that really encouraged me to try and seek more dance systems and understandings of dance systems, because as far as I was concerned, on the one hand, we have overseers and slave traders writing the most vulgar descriptions of Black women, but yet I saw descriptions of movement, and the movements were phenomenal. We have leaping, we have dancing, we have the clenching of fists. And I decided that this could potentially be an exercise in reviving these dances. So what became a short project then turned into a lifelong study. So I'm just going to show a video. No sound, I'll be talking over it. So this is of the work I was doing before my debut poetry collection, Cane, Corn and Gully. I was working with the Barbados Museum and Historical Society, so using the notes of overseers and slave traders, and excavating dances from history. I wanted to find as many dance motifs as I could, like a woman playing with her babe in the field, to more elaborate dance patterns and leaping and intricate footwork. So yeah, I try to revive as many movement systems as possible, and use only those which I could see within the present day as well. So this was also for my own mental health, and to speak to the notion of legacy and show the fragmentation and disruption of my cultural history in a way that was rich and not void of substance. So all of a sudden, the women are finally talking to me, and they're doing so through movement. And I'm able to gather a sense of kinesthetic empathy by reviving these movements as well. Okay. Literary theorist Richard Perez argues that Toni Morrison use of imagination proposes a form of restoration and reparation towards a traumatic historical memory. And I like to think that this is the work, especially when I'm using movement systems as a form of excavating history. So this then leads to Cane, Corn and Gully. So as Eve has already said, Cane, Corn and Gully was shortlisted for many prizes, many awards, and I do hope that you. Sorry, I'm not sure what happened there. Let's try that again. So I hope that you will come to see my work at some point. Okay, let me show you this. At some point, and I will share more information about where you can find out more about my doctoral practice. Okay, so dance can be a reflective and isolated experience, but it is also part of a social practice, which is realized as a movement system of external influences, which have motivated the production of choreographic intentions. In addition to this, if social dance practices in Black communities can be performed as a reflection of society, then challenges to societal norms can be present within choreographies. My doctoral project, tracing the movement as a critical framework to reclaim the narratives of Black Barbadian women, expands on Cane, Corn and Gully and seeks to study present-day dances of Black Barbadian women from amateurs to professionals. So in Cane, Corn and Gully, when I would see a documentation of a movement, and the enslaved woman held her arms up, and this maybe an image of trying to maybe wring out the sky. I was then seeking these dances as many places as I could. So from film, so let's say Soul Train, so that we might have a poem about Soul Train, and then we might have a poem where we are set in the present day, Barbados, in St. John, and then all the way back to the 1800s. So I'll talk about more later how time works, how I saw how time was working in dance, and how I use poetry to do that. And what I wanted to do with my PhD is I said, okay, well, why don't I document the dances of today? Because I think that, okay, I think we have something here. If I can try and excavate memories of the past, then why don't I use dance as an archival method for today? And maybe we can start to unearth more nuance. So there are two unique facets of my project, which I will break down for you today. The first is the methodology, which I'm super excited about. And the second one, I'm so excited about all of it. And the second is the documentation of these dances. So how I actually documented these dances in Cane Corner Gully, and how I will be documenting them during my fieldwork. So the fieldwork will be happening very soon. So you're meeting me at a very, very exciting time of my research. Okay, so in Cane, Corn, and Gully, I realized that I was able to develop a sense of kinesthetic empathy with my ancestry through movements. Dance anthropologist Adrian L. Kepler explains that structured movements systems are systems of knowledge. These systems of knowledge are socially and culturally constructed, created by, known, and agreed upon by a group of people, and primarily preserved in memory. I absolutely love this quote. I think I didn't even need to read that. I think I've learned it from scratch, because last year I carried out my preliminary research trip, and the following dance demonstration took place at a fruit stall in St. Michael, Barbados. So this was last year. So when I document, the term researcher, I am very much, you are going to see that I am obsessed with my work. So it could be a line. I could be in Chapeltown, Leeds. I could be in London. Earlier, I was in Trinidad. And yeah, I will. So my notes, my page usually starts with the woman who, the man who, I'm documenting constantly people's movements. And I do have ethical clearance now, but yes. So this is the woman who sold the ripest plantain, and mangoes. I exchanged a friendly greeting with a market seller. So this is actually from my notes from last year. While passing through town, she complimented my dress. I complimented her hat. She asked how I was. I asked her how she was. She told me she was okay. She ain't got nothing to stress about. I asked her how she manages not to stress, and exchanged various philosophies on how to live a happy life. And she told me sunshine, mangoes, staying away from bad men. The conversation continued, and she asked me about studies. When I explained to her what my research was about, she enthusiastically told me she wanted to join in and show me a dance. Before I could reply, because I did not have ethical clearance yet, but before I could reply, to my astonishment, she performed a dance I had not seen in 20 years. Once performed by my grandmother, her performance moved me to tears. She rose from her seat and moved to the side of her table and turned so she was at a slight angle, possibly so I could see the slight bend of her knees as she was wearing a long skirt. She began shuffling back and forth, sliding forward using pressure from her toes and sliding back with her weight on both feet, which never left the floor. While doing this, she made a rowing motion with her arms, again at chest level. Her hands were clenched as though she were punching the air. Her arms stretched into full extension when she shuffled forward and contracted all the way when she shuffled back. After repeating the phrase several times, she then demonstrated the turn using the same movements. She never dropped her arms or changed the rhythm, which was a steady beat. She performed 5 shifts in direction before facing me. She expressed this was her celebration dance, but celebration dance into becoming a woman. I laughed, I cried. Almost 20 years ago, upon becoming a woman myself, my grandmother performed the dance and taught it to me. Pause. Right. Remember the movements from the first story. Remember the movements from the first story. Remember the idea about menstrual cycle and becoming a woman, and then all of a sudden, it just, okay, regardless of how we might be able to have a concrete translation, and if we and the problems with concrete translations and the idea of a pure translation, okay, which does not exist, but it was a wonderful moment to really see how we can use movement to express ourselves, and what we can, and the stories and the imaginations that we can delve into from movement alone that we would not necessarily be able to get to if we were just speaking verbally. This exchange provoked me to further consider how dances are memorialized within the body, and how these systems can be passed on if connotations are also transferred, and the risk of dances being forgotten if they are not popularized or archived. And on that note, there are several dances in Barbados that have been lost. And I know that I will probably post-doc make it my pet project to try and see if I can find them again. But this is, to me, this is important. So how then can we reconcile with any systematic knowledge, emotional context, behavioral patterns, and rituals as spiritual actions within a spatial flow of movement progressing as quickly as the dancer's thoughts? How can researchers access data from an embodied perspective in consideration of the cultural practice they are attempting to examine? Discovering dance text is a reflective practice to navigate through the analysis of movement, technique, emotional responses, and cultural contextualization. If the purpose of an ethnographic dance inquiry is to unearth cultural knowledge, comprise a rubric to evaluate dance systems in relation to semiotics, and to gain new perspectives of the human experience, then I argue that dance should be integrated into the interviewing process, so the practice is present at every stage. My fieldwork will utilize a range of creative and ancestral improvisation techniques. One, I will share two. Two that I have an actual name for. The first, an example, call and response, where an individual or group articulates a phrase using either vocals, movement, an external musical instrument, or any medium which provides an outlet for artistic expression. The phrase is then responded to in a similar fashion by manipulating the components of the responder's artistry, like tone or rhythm. So if somebody if somebody starts to maybe shake their shoulders, move their shoulders up and down, another person might do the same and then add another movement. So we have, hello, hello, how are you doing? How are you doing? Another example, the second, is the gospel technique, where performances are challenged or diverted among multiple practitioners using a medium of their choice as an exercise for narrative building. A very common example, to make this a little easier to understand. So you might have a soca artist who may signal to dancers to perform a particular type of wine. So slow wine. And then a dancer, so Alison Hines might say, okay, now slow wine. And then a dancer might spontaneously do a slow wine and then carry out a movement which the crowd approves of that deviates slightly from a slow wine. So a slow wine, a very slow rotation of the hips, very isolated pelvic articulation, and then the dancer, male or female, might then continue that with crowd encouragement. Then another dancer may follow suit, and another, and another, and another. And then finally, a new dance in itself, a new choreography will be formed. The final choreographic motif features different movement signatures to the original. However, the original dance can still be found within the edifice of this new choreography. So we're thinking of this dance as layers. So the dance begins, and then another person jumps in, and another, and another, and another, and another, and another. But this is not necessary. This is not call and response, because we do not necessarily have a conversation between a group of people in terms of taking a movement and then using it to feed back to the other person. This is more of a type of stacking choreographies, and taking in turns to do so as well. So this technique usually only occurs if performers are encouraged. So like Kepler said, there is this sense of community. With community engagement, there is this idea that you have negotiated as a community and you have agreed to how you are going to be performing. So no verbal responses will actually take place. So you could be in the middle of a fete. So for those of you who have not been to a fete, if you have not been, or a lime, or there is no conversation, no verbal conversation is happening, only a movement conversation. So a person may start dancing and another person may join in, and you are both watching each other and feeding off of each other. And then with the gospel technique, what we have is gospel, as in more and more stories are being told, and we can't quite get to the answer. So in the gospel technique, we have a dance that's being performed in another, but you're not necessarily feeding off each other. But it's not a rude interrogation. Okay, so it will be my job to instigate and feed off my participants' responses. So I may choose to carry out another movement, and I will then have to pay very close attention to the dancers around me to make sure that I am engaging with them in an appropriate way, to make sure that, it's very unlikely that any offense will be taken. But obviously, my job is to hopefully engage with as many participants as I can. These methods may also assist dance ethnographers with gathering data in environments with high noise levels and alcohol consumption, which could significantly impact the interactions between participants and the researcher. So you can imagine doing a dance study in crop over, a carnival, or a fete, a lime, and you're dancing, and then you don't necessarily want to get out your pen and paper and start asking, but like, hey, what does this dance mean to you? No, that's not going to work. So this method is going to be very, very useful to me. Yes, and so while I am doing my field work, the methodologies will of course be shifting and changing depending on what is happening around me. And I guess that's the joy of being a researcher. I'm very excited. The first fieldwork session will take place during the crop over carnival season. This is an ideal time to carry out fieldwork, as Barbados is showered with rhythm. The crop over festival period offers the everyday citizens autonomy to confront and disintegrate social barriers, express their emotions, and engage in knowledge exchange with their community. The second trip will take place during the low tourist season for more intimate sessions, and I hope I will also be able to work with a variety of spiritual groups also. Okay, so yeah, how will I know that my methodologies will work? And in Barbados, where we have many improvisational dance techniques in Afro-Diasporic cultures that are more focused within where a lot of writing is situated in America. So here is some Barbadian historical context. Despite the dehumanizing campaigns towards the Black population, there is enough evidence to suggest that the white ruling class identified cultured systems of knowledge exchange among the enslaved. Communication systems incorporating dance, music, and song became a fundamental aspect to Barbadian society into the post-emancipation era and beyond up until today. So we hear a lot about, we read a lot about Negro folk spirituals, but again, usually these readings will focus on the South, and this is understandable with the amount of first-hand data we have from the 1920s, but again, Barbados should not be left out of this conversation. Lyndon Lewis, cultural historian, explained Barbadian folk culture is fundamentally comprised of idiosyncratic Moors, expressed through belief, song, dance, music, and oral storytelling, in contrast with mainstream Eurocentric popular cultures, thus offering Barbadians a means of maintaining their cultural history and self-expression and a sense of kinship. So this is very much intertwined with our culture. Folk tales become popular media for explaining and understanding the complex material conditions of the existing populace. The presence of Caribbean music genres such as calypso and soca are modern versions of this, along with the dances to accompany them. So I believe this folkloric culture is still very prevalent in Barbados today. This is not a presentation on carnival cultures and folkloric cultures, but I'm happy to also have a discussion about this after. Okay. With that said, Black Barbadian women's narratives are considerably sparse from both folktales and academia. Okay, as an Indigenous researcher and dance practitioner, though I had some cultural knowledge of dance systems performed in Barbados, I first started dancing in Barbados. Just a little background. I was first taught dance by Barbadian women, was raised there. The accent is a hybrid, awesome accent. And yes, but I do recognize that each time a dance is performed, it is experienced differently by the dancer. And due to the nature of improvisation, movement patterns will be reimagined, displaced, replaced, revived, deconstructed simultaneously. There right now, by the end of this conversation, there will be 5 more versions of the wine. So this is so I'm definitely an advocate that this sort of work needs to continue, and I believe in that this should be longitudinal research, simply because the dances will change as much as the notion of identity. This ephemeral practice speaks to the facets of the Black experience that reside in ambiguity, and therefore encourages an abundance of ideas and conversations which can challenge archetypal stereotypes of Black women. Okay, so this actually leads to the most prominent question I am asked, and I would like to address this because it always comes up. Okay, so what do you do when you don't know what a dance means? And obviously dance is nonverbal, so how can you even try to find some understanding? I always get asked this question, but Christina Sharp, this is a fantastic quote. There are, I think, specific ways that Black scholars of slavery get wedged in truths of their archives while trying to make sense of their silences, absences, and modes of disappearance. The methods most readily available to us oftentimes force us into positions that run counter to what we know. I want to celebrate the unknown, the contradictions, the weird results, the what ifs, and I am more then happy to hold up my hands and say there is room here for breath, memory, ideas, because Blackness is an ever-evolving universe that should not claim to be, no one should claim to be able to contextualize it easily. I believe this to be incredibly arrogant and problematic. This is why I am also in the field of poetry, because when it comes to understanding the unexplainable, language is rendered down to feeling. And I would like to point out that many Black dance, music, and vocal systems during the slave trade were specifically designed to be elusive to the outsider, so the enigma of some dances may be cultural artifacts unto themselves. Not knowing is a good thing. Breath is a good thing. Space, the void, is a good thing. Rumination is a good thing. So yeah, so that is my answer. That is my answer to that. So that is the first part of what I believe to be unique about this study. And so basically how I'm using these dance systems as a form of interviewing. We will, yes, there will be speech, there will be talking. I will at some point have to say, hey, can I film you for my PhD? Like, yes, there will be talking. However, most of the talking will be done through the body. Great. Okay, so Labanotation. How will I be documenting all of these dances? The goal is to have at least 20 participants during the preliminary research trip. I found more, but I need to find a way to archive all of this material. So we're going to go back to cane, corn, and gully. Okay, let's talk about Rudolf Laban. Okay, Rudolf Laban was the inventor of a notational dance movement system known as Labanotation. Okay, I hope you can all see my cursor. Right, so like a musical score. So musical score is horizontal, Labanotation is vertical. You can see down here. Right. Movement actions are represented by symbols patterned across a central vertical staff. So this would be the central vertical staff. And the staff can be accompanied by adjacent vertical staffs, depending on how detailed the notator wants to make the choreography. So you could literally do Labanotation where you just focus on the legs and then the arms. You don't need to include every part of the body, but if you wanted to, you could also articulate what a movement systems for the fingers if you wanted to. That's how detailed Labanotation can be. Okay, the shape, length, shading, and placement of the symbols on the staff informs the dancer how to perform the direction, the rhythm, and the level. And, of course, which body part to use. The notation can share either basic movements or exceptionally detailed choreography. Not every dancer knows how to use the Labanotation in the same way. Not every musician knows how to read musical notes. But music scores are more common than Labanotation. Okay, so this is a very, very early recreation of a choreography I was trying to do. Of an enslaved woman. So here, I hope you can see my cursor. You should be able to see my cursor, right? So these are short steps. So if the steps were longer, these notes would be much longer. So they would stretch like this. So this is a very long. So this arm movement is low to high to low to high to low to high. So this is like a rising movement, but the steps are very low because they're shaded in quite darkly. And then you have these little accents. So these little accents here. So if I go back, and you can see forward, diagonal, side, backwards, diagonal, middle, low. I mean, it looks complicated. I say I find it easy because obviously I've been studying it for a long time, but nothing worthwhile is easy, as they say. But yes, so this would technically be the arms rising up and down because of where it's placed on the staff. And here we have, this is actually the symbol for a clap and the gathering of hands. And as you can see, I've put clap here, stomp here. So we have the accents. So when you see these notes, that basically means the accents of the movement. So the woman is walking at a quick pace in a very low stance, raising motif 9, trial 12. And you'll see later how many trials and motif. When I say I'm obsessed, I mean I'm obsessed. I mean I'm obsessed. Okay, so let's go to what Karen K. Bradley says about Labanotation and the great dilemma that I had. Okay, cool. Right. He did not join the Nazi party. Oh dear. It's never good when someone starts with that. And he was not a racist, fascist, sorry. Okay, all right. He was not a fascist, although it is equally clear that he was naively racist in a passive way from his writings about the Red Indian and Negroes in America. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm just gonna let me go back one. I'm just gonna say it. I'm not going to repeat what Laban said about Black people dancing. We do not have any time for that. But what I will say is that I knew this dance system was being taught around the world already, and I knew that I didn't have any intentions of recreating the wheel. But it dawned on me a good few years ago that maybe I could adapt Labanotation in a way that better complemented Black dance as a living narrative of extraordinary souls with this complex relationship to gravity. A dance documentation system which both documents Black dance and addresses social commentary at the same time. So this was my goal a few years ago, and I did just that in the corner of my bedroom. I decided that the central line of the central staff in Labanotation should not be linear. I decided it needed to be curved. When I read Laban's notes on African dance cultures, it was very clear that this notation system was not made with Black people in mind or made with dance systems in mind. But even with that said, I quickly would like to make a comment on what Black dance actually is, because there is this hyper focus on various movement systems when it comes to a Black person dancing, but there are so many movements that I have witnessed and throughout various texts I've been reading, where we will see very intricate, very almost kind of you might consider them to be stoic, but very elongated necks and straight spines. And apparently, African dance is we have a curvature of the spine because Black people do not know how to elongate their necks. No. Yes. So does that mean that Tanzania, Botswana? Recently, I saw a dance in Uganda. So these dances where we do not see necessarily a low earthy posture, does that mean that they are not African dances? Even though we have evidence that these dances were performed before any sense of colonization and globalization, right? So yeah. But with that said, I was interested in this idea of time and non-linear and the non-linear discourse and how we can speak to our histories. So I'm just going to go back one. So I started experimenting with the staff. I started experimenting with how we can speak to these intricate dance patterns and how a dancer can almost carry out a solo performance and explore motifs, explore motifs within their community. and within them in their self as well. So there's this constant reflective practice that's also happening within these dances, and I wanted to make sure that I could find a way to experiment with this idea of with this eccentricity, but also this reckoning with the self. And I was really thinking about the notion of double consciousness and how, well, from many experiences that I have read about, spoken about, engaged with among Barbadians, West Indians, and Black British people, Black Americans, and how we might use dance as a means of understanding a notion of identity, but also dismantling and reviving the idea of the self when your body has this physical sense of oppression, but also a spiritual sense of oppression as well. And knowing that your ancestors were restricted in their movements and using movements as a means of empowerment as well. So this is literally all of the thinking that was happening while I was creating these dance motifs and these dance notational systems. Here as well, so what you see is a series of women lying down. So these are movements of contractions and expansions with the arms and legs lying on the floor and rolling. So I wanted to really have this sense of time and various women talking to each other. Again, this is in the book, but I will go to probably the most standout pieces in the book. So
Safiya, and if you could start wrapping up in the next few minutes, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's fine. So on the left, we have Black women dancing across space and time. And if you flip the book, you literally flip the dance. So we have dances, you can read the dance this way, you can read the dance this way. So this is what I was able to do by basically changing Labanotation. And on the right, we have what I call the Barbadian wheel. So I was able to, do not ask how long this took, way too long, where I was able to showcase thousands of dances by, if you were to turn every segment of the wheel, you will actually create a new dance. So basically trying to understand how I can map dances across time. So how do our dances speak to our lineage? Thinking about the trajectory of the movements and the placement of the movements, and the idea of this circular motion and this notion of the return. I was going to quickly say that last week I watched Arrival for the first time, and it's where this linguistics professor is summoned to learn an alien language, and she discovers that the extraterrestrials have a language system which is not linear. And I thought to myself, okay, well, Afro-Diasporic dance cannot be perceived as linear. It's not a linear medium. And dance behaves like splashed milk. That's how time behaves. So this is another one of my graphics that I will be using to document all of these dances. So I'm just absolutely fascinated with recording data and recording systems of data, and how we can apply this information. So I will be using rough sketches, film. I will be filming as a great deal of my dances as well, simply because I want to, because there is so much within a few minutes of choreography. So while most people may watch a person dancing and say, okay, you're just winding your hips, you're just rotating your waist, right? No, absolutely not. So during my fieldwork, one two quick examples. I was able to identify 39 hip articulations within a 1 minute and 12-second time frame. 39 hip articulations, and this was from a woman who was an elder. So this is why the comprehensive detail is needed. And then another young lady is doing a pelvic heel toe movement that looks like a popular Jamaican dance, but because she's loosened her knees, she's able to allow a more, she's able to loosen her pelvic region, but it looks like a heel toe movement, but it's very unique. And she's doing about 29 versions within one song. So this is the level of depth that I want to go to. So yeah, this is literally a level of depth that I want to go to. And you can ask me questions about my preparation and how I'm getting ready for this. So it's grueling and intense. I'll be performing. I'll be a practitioner observation. I'll be observing as a practitioner for 6 days a week. While I'm in Barbados. So I'm preparing for that spiritually, physically, etc. Yes, so to round off this presentation and to refer back to the girl on the train, without movement, there would have been no discussion, no understanding between myself and the girl. There would have been fear, vulnerability, and judgment. We found mutual ground before expounding. And if you're doing a research where the majority of people speak a foreign language, would you not attempt to speak to them in their language? It's a very simple question. My job is not to humanize Black women. This is not our job to prove to the world our humanity. I'm simply showing an alternative route towards understanding, appreciation, and empathy in a way that is culturally relevant, using the language of a misunderstood nation. Cool. So that's me. That's me done. I look forward to having a conversation with you. Thank you.
Okay, can everybody please just give a virtual round of applause? Either switch your cameras on or yeah, thank you so much. That was an absolutely brilliant presentation. As somebody who has 2 left feet and is absolutely unqualified to speak on dance whatsoever, I think I'll open it up to the floor because I know that a lot of people were really moved by by so many elements of that. So I've got a question already coming in the chat, but please feel free to, if you want to switch your camera on, and if you want to virtually put your hand up, then I'll come to you as we go along. So Annette Walker writes, thank you for such a great presentation. I've a question in 2 to 3 parts. 1A, what are your notations aimed at? B, is it more about the process than the product? And then C, how do you decide what remains elusive and what gets recorded in a notation system?
Cool. Thank you, Annette, for the fantastic questions. Who are your notations aimed at? So in the same way we have musical scores, you might it's easy to think that a concerto is only for people who want to play the music, but no, there's something very beautiful about browsing these music notes as well. So I was recently at the Disney exhibition, and the musical scores for Lion King and all of the great scores were just archived. Now, many people may not be able to read the music, but we know that they exist. We know that they are worthy of being archived and being showcased. And every time I would see, people have said to me, well, I can't read your dances, and I'm saying, well, can you read Vivaldi? Can you read Vivaldi? No, you can't. But the point is that I've decided that I believe these dances are worth archiving in a way that is in a dance notation, using dance notation as a way that is universally recognized. So I did have to use Labanotation because that is, it's taught in Ghana. So I did make sure that dancers were able to read the dance notation systems as well. So even though they are curved, I was able to find dancers who read Labanotation. And I said, I want all of you, separating them. Can you recreate these dances, using my methods? and they all came up with, so obviously I don't have beats because these dances were revived. So I'm very much using just the museum, and I'm just trying to kind of, okay, let's go for it. I'm working on a whim here, and I'm trying something new. But every single dancer who read Labanotation performed. They performed pretty much a similar choreography, and when they were provided with context as well, so they performed it. And we have many musical scores, many compositions that have been damaged over time, and there's something quite wonderful about musicians trying to revive them. So yeah, so I guess who is it aimed at? It's aimed at anyone, everyone. I don't think the work would necessarily discriminate, but I like the idea of just saying that these dances are important. I want to be able to have a wine, or I saw someone put cent, 5 cent, 10 cent dollar. I want that to be important enough to say, hey, this should be archived. Cool. Is it more about the process than the product? Yeah, it's both. I mean, the products, I don't think there is a product. I don't think there is an end. My supervisors will not be happy about that answer. There should be an end to this research, but the process is rewarding. For me, yeah, the process is everything. I just love the idea of hearing people speak, of just knowing that there's nuance in these narratives. How do you decide what remains elusive and what gets recorded in notation system? That's a great question. So first of all, I try to jot down literally as much as I can. There will always be a note missing or something missing. I will not be able to, if I watch a very simple dance, there will be an eye flicker that I might not be able to notate. So I have to remember that I'm going off a feeling, and hopefully that this research will grow to a sense where I can one day have the funding to get as many people as possible to help me with this work, because I'm already seeing getting questions about postdoc research and etc. But I try to record as much as I can, but then of course there's this thing about aesthetics and and when I display things at an exhibition, and also if I want people, so I've also had general members of the public do a couple of dances from the book, so I might want to simplify things as much as possible and do left, right, left, right, left, right. So yeah.
Okay, so I see that we've got Sonia has their hand up, so we'll come to you shortly. Just to read a few more messages from the chat. Nan said, I really enjoyed this, and the methodologies you're using are very thoughtful. Thank you. And Niala says, thank you very much for this presentation. Plenty interesting. I have a quick question. Could you possibly show us the slide with the, is it Capley 2000 source? Quote again, please. So I'm not quite sure what she's referring to there.
Yeah, I can.
I was trying to take note of the reference.
Let me see if I can quickly copy and paste that and put that in the chat for you. Because that is a...
Okay. While you're doing that, somebody else asked if you have a YouTube channel or a social media channel. So if you could put that in the chat. But also we have some people who, sorry, session is being recorded, so please also check out the video of this at some point after the session.
That is your opportunity, people, to note. There you go. There is your QR code for said website.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. Sonia, do you want to ask you a question?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for this presentation. I'm going to try to go slowly for achieving clarity here. As I consider embodied methodologies in my own work, the methodological implications of this work those implications were foremost in my mind. And I wondered, first of all, I like your responses to the questions earlier. I don't think your supervisors would mind so much the way in which you answered. But let me use that avenue to poke a little bit more in terms of methodology. And I understand that Labanotation, in its kind of privileged, let's call it European sensibility and epistemology, would perhaps provide some dissonance for persons hearing about your work. And I want to probe this dissonance a little bit, because you respond quite appropriately to the notion of that dissonance by virtue of your own improvisation in that methodology, which I thought you would have said, because that's your answer, that your own improvisation on that methodology, improvisation being very key to your own methodology, I think that's the response in terms of, allaying fears about that dissonance. But I want to ask you, though, a little further, in relation to the power and the centrality of ancestral improvisation in the context of the work, do you think that dissonance still remains? Like, how do you reconcile Labanotation and the centrality of improvisation with the use of that methodology beyond process, beyond archival purposes, beyond the ways in which we want to internationalize the work and have readability in larger audiences? How do you reconcile that ancestral component? And I this is just for conversation purposes, but it struck me.
Yeah. Thank you, Sonja, for your questions and probing and interrogations. Huge fan. This is something I have had to contend with myself, obviously for the first collection. I think that at first it was, okay, I want to have something recorded, but then there is something about this, about embodiment in itself, and how do I speak to this, how our movements will resonate within the community. Because I think there's another question in your question, which is also about the disparity regarding how we even view our dances in various communities as well. Because while one person may see a woman dancing, another person will have several other connotations to that as well. And so I also had to reckon with this idea that I can't necessarily make people think the way I want them to think, and I have to keep as many possibilities open as possible during a performative practice. I considered that Labanotation would be purely a way of documentation and archiving, but of course, like experimenting and, like you said, improvising with the artwork. But then there's also this idea that I might be able to share the work through film, through performance, through conversation, and asking people who approach my work to almost invite people to maybe recreate these scenes for themselves, and have these conversations, that when we are dancing, that there is a constant discourse which is happening, and this is something that is happening consistently. I think that these ancestral dance techniques, there's something very spiritual and ethereal about them, and I do not think, I'm going to be very honest, that that they will ever be able to be documented in a way that that encompasses all that they are. it is something that needs to be felt. And my job as a poet is to offer feeling. And that's why I said what I said about poetry, to offer feeling, because words become, I have a quote where language is irresponsible, or language is irresponsible because there is not going to be a way for me to completely share what these dances are and what these dances mean. But if I can have some entry point, if I can have some understanding that these dances are special, these dances are wonderful, there is a universe within each of them. They are not just simple, oh, look at lady over there, she, walking up. No, there's more going on here. And it's simply to open this conversation. So yeah, I have a lot of conflicting ideas, and I had to really, Labanotation was very difficult for me to really, because these are the systems. At the end of the day, I'd still need to remember the dances. And as a practitioner, I'm going to need to use Labanotation to write, oh, they step with their left, they step with their right, they step with this. And then, then I turned it into an artistic practice, and then, decided, okay, I'm going to make it into an exhibit. But at the same time, it's such an elusive and wonderful medium. But I really had, I did have a lot of issues with sharing Labanotation. I thought, okay, is the world going to be ready for Labanotation and Afrocentric dance cultures? Because at the same time, many of these dance cultures were meant to be elusive for a reason, right? So yeah, there's that as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. So
okay, thank you so much. We've got Yanaya's put a question in the chat asking about the methodology. Do you have elements for crossing reference with research methodologies in visual arts, or do you use theoretical references from visual culture perspective?
Do I have elements for crossing reference with research methodologies in visual arts? Do I use theoretical references from the visual culture perspective? I think I use if I understand your question correctly, I think I use a variety of research methodology. So yeah, so in visual arts, I think I use a variety, but more. So with visual, I'm assuming you're including performative in that, not just necessarily fine art, or you're including film and dance, etc. But yes, I would use, as long as we are discussing, as long as we are discussing how we are framing the languages of Black women, then I will use that reference, as long as it is helpful. I think that I do need to be careful with not delving into. I would like to speak about referencing. I would like to make it clear that it's very easy when we speak about Blackness to delve into the notion of dichotomies very quickly. So either or, bad or good. And what I'm so fascinated about with dance is that there is room for maybe ifs, if nots. I want to find dances where the dance is just there because it is. I want women to tell me that they are doing the dance because they actually hate the dance. I want to find as much contradictions as possible in the research. So yes, we'll see. We'll see. I'm in year 2, so I'm about to go into field work. So we'll see. Ask me by the end which references I've drawn from the most, because year 3 will. we'll see what happens.
So I had a question about about the reaction in Barbados to your work. So
Mhm.
I imagine that you've been interacting with kind of more formal people who work in dance and dance tuition, and I just wondered, has their reaction been one of support? Has it been dismissive? Is it one of surprise? I just wondered what that was. Yeah, the kind of local responses that you've had so far. And also I wanted to ask about the kind of pan-Caribbean perspective as well. Because just the way that you spoke at the beginning about the way that language and dance and movement and all of this is part of a way that we communicate and speak with one another. And I'm just wondering, how much are you actively looking for those linkages, and for that, the resonance and the similarities between people's lived experiences, and it just makes me think really about the Haitian Revolution, and thinking about how it wasn't just Creole, but also dance was a really powerful means of not just defying kind of and overpowering, the powers that be, but also it was a way of communicating with each other and creating a shared language and shared solidarity together. So yeah, it's just, those were the kind of things that sprung to mind during your talk.
So there is not what, so yeah, Barbados responded, the Bajans responded very positively. And this question will answer several other questions as well, regarding who is Labanotation for? The preacher talking to the choir, they know. It was this point where I explained my work to my auntie, and she was like, yes, dances, yes, this is what we do. And it dawned, every time I have spoken to people about my work, there is not one person who has said, well, no, this makes no sense. Everyone has said, well, duh, like this is our thing, this is our medium. It's, of course, dance is a form of communication. Like, what are you talking about? Like, this is not new, but yet there is something about the work that has that where I was able to make or I am trying to make some sort of original contribution. I think that, so my book did win the People's Choice Award in Barbados. They love the fact that I'm not showcasing Black Barbadian women in this in a way that is either we have these, there's this notion of the slave narrative of or the Black woman, where you're either extremely rebellious or you're oppressed, and it was a jubilant moment to be able to show Black Barbadian women where we're not necessarily defined by these these archetypes again. When do we get to experience our own nuance, and when do we get to experience ambiguities? I love that. So yeah, it was a celebration. And when some of the notations were read, they were quite complex. But what was so funny is when I actually performed them, Bajans are performing them back to me. So forget I say, yes, we have the visual representation of these dances forever. And I would like for the field notes to be to remain in Barbados, so they are archived. That is the plan. But the dances themselves, they are memorable. They are very well known. We know that this woman did that at church last Sunday. We know, so all the dances are very well recognized. In terms of the community across the Americas, it's interesting having these conversations, but just to include my ideas within the discourse, because as I did say at the beginning, I find it very strange, even when I watch documentaries, there will be a reference to Haiti, there will be a reference to Jamaica, there will be a reference to, there'll be a reference to Botswana, but there won't be a reference to Barbados. And I'm thinking, where are the slave codes? Like, are you kidding me right now? And I'm, I know. So it's really it's really strange. So I do think that I've never had a completely I've never had negative responses. All of the responses have been very progressive, and I think that most scholars that I have met within the Americas are working towards finding ways to tell our stories, which do provoke progressive ideas and help with this problem of Eurocentric methodologies and ideologies. And I will say that the word decolonization is used too much. It's used too much. It's thrown around flippantly. And I think a lot of scholars are, in the UK, are probably using it to gain brownie points, but we're not really talking about what decolonization is. So I'm really glad for the progressive conversations. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm not sure if anyone else have we got any questions from anybody else? So I suppose I'll just expand on that last point that you mentioned about kind of terminology and Eurocentricity. But I was thinking as well about fieldwork and how it's framed. We've been talking about that a lot recently, about even how helpful it is as a term to think on these terms, basically. And I just wondered if that had fed into your research about being Bayesian, being based in the UK, and then having this kind of approach, kind of juggling with all of those constraints basically within the academy, right? Mm-hmm. In terms of how formally to address the theme of dance, but also more broadly kind of challenge some of these more normative frameworks that you encounter.
I think that in speaking on bringing identity and into the discussion as well, I really I was nervous at the beginning about my position as what I call an across-Atlantic child who's kind of torn between two islands, but at the same time I've grown to appreciate my perspective of being able to kind of look at view both the UK and Barbados from this as a person who probably feels like they're literally based in the middle of the Atlantic. I mean, Google pin, funny story, literally I typed in home and my pin was put in the middle of the Atlantic one day. So I thought, okay, well, this is perfect. This is great. And I really so I started to appreciate having this perspective, and I always wanted my research to identify with any. I always wanted my research to identify with scholars who were interested in really answering these difficult questions about Eurocentric viewpoints. I do not understand how we can look at a cultural artifact without engaging in the cultural artifact. I think there's something very strange about that. So when I was thinking about dance and how I've been raised in Barbados and I have all of this supposed dance knowledge, I still don't know anything. So how can I, as a Black British Barbadian dancer, do this research when even I know that every single day a new dance is being created? So that was a real challenge for me. And I thought to myself, okay, let me look at the amazing work which has been done so far in dance, but then let me think about, because I was, I think I started my PhD when the word term decolonization was really, oh my God, I mean, it has been overkill. But I'm wondering, are we willing to actually go back over research and dismantle these ideas and really understand Eurocentric viewpoints? So how do we even disseminate our research? how do we disseminate our research? How do we interview people? How do we, maybe we need to go back and rethink everything. And I think that's what the dance techniques were all about. And I thought, I can't stand there in the middle of a carnival fair and ask somebody what this dance means to them. I need to engage in this gospel technique and find another dancer who will do it with me. And then, okay, you dance, now you dance, now you dance, now you dance. We need to go from the very beginning, and we need to redo all of this. So even the way I share the PhD, I'm inviting new ideas regarding, okay, so I want to do an exhibition, I want to do a dance performance, I want to do this, I want to do that. I want conferences to be filled with carnival characters now. I want this, I want, and I'm trying to be creative, and just allowing the creativity to flow, really. But it has been challenging, and also self-care. I am not attempting to decolonize every part of my research or the dance anthropology. This methodology that I'm using will not be an end all, but at least it's a start, and that's the point, right? It's just meant to be opening the door. So
thank you so much. We've got a couple of really lovely messages in the chat I wanted to read before we end the session. So Ruth says she really likes your work, Safiya. It's a seminal nature appreciation of complexity and ambiguity, your personal investment in the study and poetic sensibility that holds everything together. This is a very important project. Thank you for sharing your research with us today, which I think is a lovely way to round off the session. Birgitta also says thank you for this inspiring talk. It's so great that you did not simply read out a paper. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and doubts. And Juanita Cox says that she's fascinated by symbiotics and sign systems, seeing that Labanotation is to my layman's eyes tone deaf and 2 left feet. A wonderful vision. That's not quite true. I've seen you dance, Juanita. A wonderful visual metaphor for the subversive, esoteric, sophisticated nature of dance and movement. And she likes the way the symbols speak volumes, but only to those in the know. And then the messages are just coming in thick and fast now. So I think just to say, can everybody just again give Safiya a virtual round of applause and say thank you. What a fantastic way to round off what has been an incredible year of Caribbean research seminars. And just I'll just say thank you and stop recording now.